I'd stepped off set for 20 minutes to touch up my lipstick. 20 goddamn minutes, and he let her put on my wedding dress and pose for photos like she was the bride. I scrolled backward through the outtakes, hard hammering. There were more. Dozens more. Buried deep in the unused folder, all time-stamped within that 20-minute window. Her sitting in my designated bridal chair while he adjusted the veil, him kneeling down to fix the hem on her holding my bouquet, grinning at the camera like she'd won something. I'd laughed about it earlier, actually. When I came back to set and saw her hovering near the garment bag, Alexander had waved me off. She was just admiring the lace. Relax. I rolled my eyes and teased him about being too nice to the new hire. Now every tiny interaction curdled in my chest, a long trail of micro-betrayals I'd blindly ignored for 6 months straight. The late nights at the office, the team dinners he stopped inviting me to, the way he'd flinch when I reached for his phone. The new cologne he'd started wearing, something witty, expensive, not the brand I'd bought him for our anniversary. I'd explained every single one away. 0.7 years of trust will make you do that. It'll make you stupid. I deleted every single photo from the shared album, all 912. Every sunset silhouette, every candid laugh, every shot of us forehead to forehead that I'd been so excited to frame above our fireplace. Gone, just like that. I left only that one photo, 647, the one where she's in my dress, his face pressed to hers, sitting alone in the outtakes folder like a severed head on a pike. Then I texted him, "We need to talk." He didn't reply for an hour. I sat there at my desk, staring at that one photo, and I went through 7 years of memories like I was flipping through a book I'd already read. The first date at that dive bar in Brooklyn, him buying me a whiskey sour and talking my ear off about his startup idea. The time he stayed up with me for 3 days when my mom was in the hospital, holding my hand in the waiting room without saying a word. The proposal on the rooftop of our first apartment building, him down on one knee in the rain because he couldn't wait for the weekend like he planned. 7 years. 7 years of building a life together, and he couldn't even keep his hands to himself for a 3-hour photo shoot. At 12:47, my phone buzzed. It wasn't Alexander. It was a voice message from an unknown number. I pressed play. "Ms. Carter, Mr. Reed wanted me to tell you. He says it was just a silly candid, is it really worth making a big deal out of? He's kind of frustrated that you're overreacting like this." Amanda's voice. High, breathy, that little giggle she always did at the end of sentences like she was sharing a secret. She'd sent it from her personal phone. Alexander had given her my number. Had told her to relay the message instead of calling me himself. I played it again, and then a third time because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My fiancé had just been caught letting his assistant wear my wedding dress, and his response was to have her call me at almost 1 a.m. to tell me I was overreacting. Cliffhanger too. I pulled up our shared iCloud dashboard, something we'd set up together for security, back when we trusted each other, and saw he'd handed his personal phone to her an hour before the voice note. She'd had full access to his messages, his photos, everything he'd sworn 2 years ago he'd never let anyone touch his phone. Privacy is non-negotiable, he'd said. I guess that rule only applied to me. I didn't reply. I set my phone face down on the desk and finished my wine, and then I poured another glass. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my sectional in an old NYU hoodie, red-rimmed eyes burning from staring at that isolated photo on loop, dissecting every fight we'd had about Amanda in the past 6 months. Back in March, I'd mentioned feeling uncomfortable with how often he stayed late at the office with her, 11 p.m. most weeknights, sometimes later. He'd called me paranoid, accused me of projecting trust issues from my dad's affair when I was a kid, promised their dynamic was strictly professional. In May, I'd found a handwritten sticky note tucked in his briefcase, Amanda's messy scroll. "Thanks for last night, winking face." And he tossed it in the trash without explanation, dismissing it as meaningless office banter. Each argument had ended with me backing down, apologizing for being overly jealous, reassuring him I trusted his judgment. Turns out my gut was right all along. At 5:17 a.m., a sharp knock echoed through my foyer. Did I know the exact time? Because I checked my watch when it started. I dragged myself off the couch, not bothering to change out of the hoodie or run a brush through my hair, and pulled open the front door. He was there in a tailored navy suit, crisp white shirt, hair perfectly styled like he was heading into a board meeting, and behind him, standing just a little too close, was Amanda. Pale pink wrap dress, minimal makeup, eyes red-rimmed like she'd been crying for hours. They looked like they'd come from a funeral, or a deposition. "Emily," Alexander said, stepping past me into the foyer like he owned the place. "Can we talk?" I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "You brought your secretary to my house at 5 a.m. to talk." "She wanted to apologize in person," he said. He glanced back at her, and his face softened, that soft, concerned look he used to give me when I was stressed about a deal. "She's been beating herself up about this all night. I had to drag her out of bed at 4:30 just to get her over here." Cliffhanger 3. 6 weeks prior, I'd asked him to bring me to a private weekend retreat with his investors, something I'd been excited about for months, and he turned me down flat. "Strictly professional separation," he'd said. "No plus ones." But dragging his assistant to his fiancé's apartment at dawn to mediate a personal fight, that was apparently fine. Amanda stepped forward, twisting her hands together. "Miss Carter, I am so sorry. Did I never meant to upset you? I'd never worn anything that beautiful before, and Mr. Reed said it would be fine. Just one quick picture, and I got carried away, and..." She started crying. Real, heaving sobs, like I just told her dog died. Alexander's jaw tightened. He turned to me, and there was actual anger in his eyes. Anger at me. "Look at what you're doing to her," he said. "She's a kid, Emily. She's 26 years old. She comes from nothing, single mom in Jersey, works 3 jobs to pay off her student loans, and you're making her feel like she committed a felony over one stupid photo." I stared at him. I really looked at him for the first time in probably a year. The man I'd fallen in love with would never have spoken to me like this. He would never have brought another woman to my house at 5 in the morning and defended her instead of me. But this wasn't the man I'd fallen in love with. This was a stranger. One stupid photo. I repeated, MY voice was calm. Too calm, maybe. She put on my wedding dress, MY custom, $12,000 wedding dress that I haven't even walked down an aisle in yet. She posed for intimate photos with my fiancé, and you're telling me I'm overreacting. It wasn't intimate, he said. It was just a fun picture. You're making it into something it's not. You always do this. You take one little thing and you blow it up into this whole drama. Amanda pulled a crumpled piece of paper out of her purse. An 8x10 print of that photo. She'd printed it out. She'd brought it with her, like she was planning to show it off. I was gonna frame it, she said, sniffling. For my apartment. I know that sounds stupid, but I've never had a nice photo of myself in a pretty dress, and I took the photo from her hand. I looked at it for a long moment, her in my dress, his face pressed to hers, both of them smiling like they were the ones getting married. Then I tore it in half, clean down the middle. The sound of ripping paper was loud in the quiet foyer. Amanda gasped. Alexander's face went red. What the fuck is wrong with you? He said. He stepped toward me, and for a second I thought he was gonna yell, maybe even grab me. Not that he ever had, but I'd seen him angry. I'd seen him lose his temper on contractors who messed up a job. I'd seen him fire people on the spot for crossing him. But he'd never looked at me like that, like I was the enemy. That photo meant something to her, he said, his voice low and tight. She was gonna hang it on her wall. You had no right. No right? I laughed. IT came out harsh, bitter. It's my dressed MY fiancé, MY wedding, and she was gonna hang a photo of herself in my dress, with my fiancé on her bedroom wall, and you're mad at me. He opened his mouth to say something, then closed it. He glanced at Amanda, who was still crying, then back at me. Emily, he said, and his voice was softer now, pleading.
Small.
This is ridiculous. It's one photo. We've been together 7 years. You're gonna throw all of that away over one picture? I looked at him, really looked at him, and I realized something. He wasn't sorry. Not really. He was sorry he got caught. He was sorry I was making a fuss. But he wasn't sorry he'd done it. Because if he were sorry, he wouldn't have brought her here. He wouldn't be defending her. He'd be on his knees, begging me to forgive him. 7 years, I said. My voice was steady. And you couldn't even wait until after the wedding to start fucking your secretary. His eyes widened. Emily, we haven't. Don't, I said. I held up a hand. Don't lie to me. Not now. Not after everything I've already seen tonight. He was quiet for a long time. Amanda had stopped crying. She was watching us, her eyes darting between the two of us like she was watching a tennis match. I'm not fucking her, he said finally. His voice was quieter now, defensive. Nothing's happened. She's just my assistant. We're close. That's all. She's been through a lot, and I look out for her. That's it. Close enough to let her wear my wedding dress, I said. Close enough to pose for intimate photos. Close enough to have her call me at 1 in the morning to tell me I'm overreacting. Close enough to bring her to my house at 5 a.m. to defend her instead of apologizing to me. He ran a hand through his hair. That frustrated gesture he always did when he didn't get his way. You know what, he said, his voice was hardening again. I tried it. I came here at 5 in the morning to fix this, and you're not even willing to listen. That if you want to be this jealous and insecure, fine. But don't come crying to me when you realize you threw away 7 years over nothing. He turned to leave. Amanda followed him, pausing at the door to give me a look. Not a sad look, a triumphant one, quick, so he wouldn't see it. Just a flicker of her eyes, a tiny tilt of her chin. Like she'd won. I saw it. And I knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I closed the door behind them, then I leaned against it, and for the first time that night, I let myself cry, not for long, just a minute, 2 minutes. Enough to get it out of my system. I don't do public crying, I don't do breakdowns. I'm the woman who closed a $40 million deal 2 days after her appendix burst. I don't fall apart. But this hurt. 7 years of your life walking out the door with another woman on his arm, that leaves a mark. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my hoodie. I walked into my home office. I sat down at my desk. And I opened a new folder on my computer. I named it Read Files. Inside that folder, I created subfolders, text messages, photos, financial records, witness statements. I'd spent 7 years building a company from a one-woman operation in my living room to a 50-person firm with projects across 3 states. I knew how to build a case. I knew how to gather evidence, and I knew how to make sure that when I struck, I didn't miss. Alexander Reed thought this was about one photo. He thought I was just being dramatic. He had no idea what was coming for him. By 9 a.m., my corporate attorney's cell rang straight to voicemail 3 times running. She was in a downtown real estate arbitration hearing, so I fired off a detailed, encrypted email outlining the dress photo incident, Alexander's pre-dawn visit, Amanda's passive-aggressive voice note, and the printed portrait I'd torn in half. I attached screenshots of the bridal suite outtakes as digital exhibits, flagged the venue deposit contract, and the shared trust fund we'd opened for our honeymoon down in the Florida Keys. I didn't send a single angry line in that message, only cold, factual bullet points, the same sharp documentation style I used for $80 million commercial development bids. Business mode was my safest emotional shield, the habit I'd honed when my father abandoned our family mid-adolescence, leaving me to rebuild our household finances at 16. Halfway through drafting the legal email, I pulled up Alexander's public Instagram page, the account he'd barely touched for 4 full years. 0 couple reels, no anniversary posts, nothing that tied him to our 7-year commitment. The feed sat blank, waiting for whatever petty retaliation he planned to launch against me. I expected Alexander to flood my text with apologies, excuses, or angry rebuttals within an hour of leaving my townhouse. Instead, my phone sat silent until noon when a mutual college friend texted me a screenshot without a single explanatory line. It was Alexander's Instagram story carousel, uploaded that morning from Six Flags Great Adventure, the amusement park we'd agreed to visit together for our 6-year anniversary the previous summer, back when he'd still prioritized my company over his assistant's trivial whims. The slides cycled nonstop. Amanda sipping a shared milkshake from one single straw, Alexander leaning in to take a bite of her vanilla ice cream cone off the same spoon, him kneeling down to wipe chocolate syrup off the hem of her sundress, his palm lingering on her calf longer than basic professionalism demanded, her head resting on his shoulder mid-roller coaster line, his arm wrapped loose around her waist. Every frame captured a level of casual domestic intimacy he'd never once bothered to give me in public, even at our engagement party, surrounded by hundreds of industry peers and family. The caption underneath the full post read, "Making up for lost downtime with my hardest working team member." Multiple old college acquaintances flooded the comment section within minutes, playful jabs masking obvious gossip. "Man, you spoil your assistants way too hard read." "Lucky girl getting a private amusement park date with the city's top tech CEO. Hope Emily doesn't scroll this feed by accident, Elmeo." 3 seconds flat after that last comment popped up, the entire carousel vanished without warning. Alexander deleted every photo, wiped the caption, and scrubbed all trace of the post off his profile like he'd never uploaded it at all. The cowardice of the move hit harder than the images themselves. He wanted to parade his favoritism for Amanda to our shared social circle, yet lacked the backbone to stand behind his own choices once someone pointed out my existence. My phone blew up with a flood of audio voice notes less than 10 seconds after the post disappeared. Alexander sent 6 back-to-back recordings, each one growing louder and more defensive, his tone steeped in manufactured victimhood that I'd grown far too familiar with over the last half year of petty fights over Amanda's boundary breaches. Before you jump to another insane conclusion, those photos were just me making it up to Amanda for the mess at your place this morning. You destroyed her favorite print of herself, so I took her out to snap replacement shots to make her feel better. It's not some big secret romance. Quit twisting every small gesture into a personal attack on you. I deleted the story as soon as people started stirring drama, okay? I knew you'd spiral if you saw it, so I nipped the gossip in the bud before it got out of hand. I'm trying to compromise here. Can you at least meet me halfway? All I want is to fix this stupid rift between us that I've already conceded by taking down the post. I'm reaching out first after you blew up at 5 a.m. Don't punish me indefinitely over one dumb photograph. He followed the voice notes with a string of heart and apology emojis spamming my message thread, a juvenile tactic he'd relied on every time he lost an argument he couldn't logically win. I stared at the stack of audio files for a full minute, comparing his current impatient, dismissive tone to the soft, patient voice he used when consoling Amanda through minor stressors at work. The contrast was jarring. Every ounce of empathy he reserved for his 26-year-old secretary vanished the second he spoke directly to me, his fiancée of 7 years. In every prior fight we'd weathered, arguments over missed anniversaries, delayed vacation plans, late office nights, we'd always circled back to compromise within hours. Alexander would apologize, acknowledge my hurt, and carve out dedicated one-on-one time to repair our bond. This time, there was zero remorse, zero recognition of how deeply he'd violated my trust, only demands that I drop all my anger and forgive him instantly on his terms. It was the first clear signal that his feelings for me had eroded completely long before the bridal suite photo fiasco. I typed one plain, unemotional text response. No extra punctuation, no sarcasm to give him fuel to argue further. The wedding is officially cancelled. No negotiating, no takeback. A hidden truth I'd buried down deep resurfaced as I hit send. Alexander had spent 2 full years pushing back our wedding date, constantly claiming we were too young to settle down, that he needed more unrestricted single years to scale his startup. I brushed it off as career ambition back then, but now I understood. He'd already been mentally checking out of our relationship, waiting for an excuse to delay commitment indefinitely while entertaining his growing attachment to Amanda. I hovered my cursor over the send button for a longer message, reading we're breaking up entirely, ready to cut every tie for good, when a new friend request pinged my messenger notifications. The profile belonged to Amanda Collins, her profile picture a cropped shot of her grinning against Alexander's shoulder from the amusement park that same day. I hesitated roughly 10 seconds before tapping accept, curious to see what fresh provocation she planned to hurl my way unfiltered, without Alexander hovering nearby to moderate her words. Seconds after approving her request, dozens upon dozens of unedited park photos flooded my chat window, far more explicit and intimate than the small carousel Alexander had briefly posted online. Shots of them sharing a single cotton candy stick, her fingers tangled with his over the amusement park railings, Alexander tucking stray strands of hair behind her ear while she batted her eyelashes up at him. One candid captured him squatting down to wipe a soda stain off her white sneakers, his full attention locked on her like I didn't exist anywhere in his life. The pair moved through the park with the easy comfort of a long-term couple, not a CEO and entry-level administrative assistant bound by strict professional lines. Beneath the flood of photographs, Amanda typed out a saccharine, taunting paragraph layered under fake innocence, her passive-aggressive subtext impossible to miss. Ms. Carter, mister. Reed kept going on about how pretty I looked in every single frame we shot today. He said I'm the most beautiful woman he's ever laid eyes on, and I can't tell if he's just being nice to cheer me up after this morning's fight, or if he actually means it. Could you help me figure out if he's lying? I'd hate to misread his sweet little compliments and embarrass myself later. A bitter, hollow laugh escaped my throat as I read her message. She wasn't confused about his intentions. She was intentionally parading their closeness directly in front of me, testing how much humiliation I was willing to tolerate for the sake of our 7-year engagement. I had given her endless grace for months, writing off her lingering touches and flirty comments as youthful naivety, but this deliberate, unmasked provocation crossed every single line I could possibly abide. I wasn't going to sit around absorbing her petty power plays any longer. I grabbed my leather crossbody bag, stuffed the printed torn half of the wedding dress photo inside, and drove straight to Alexander's high-rise downtown corporate office after locking my townhouse front door behind me. The sun had fully set by the time I pulled into the underground executive parking garage of his building, all overhead office lights dimmed except for the single floor housing his private corner suite. I rode the elevator up alone, my grip tight around my cell phone loaded with every amusement park photo Amanda had sent to taunt me, rehearsing no pre-planned lines. This confrontation needed raw, unscripted honesty instead of calculated legal speech. I pushed his glass office door open without knocking, stepping inside mid-conversation between Alexander and Amanda, the scene unfolding in front of my eyes confirming every awful suspicion I'd spent the day documenting. Alexander sat slouched behind his oversized mahogany desk, stacks of unopened quarterly business reports piled untouched to his left. Amanda was stretched out fully across the leather customer sofa positioned 10 feet from his workstation, a giant bag of cheddar cheese popcorn balanced on her lap, scrolling TikTok at full volume without a care for the uncompleted work sitting right in front of her supervisor. She tilted her head up the second I stepped through the doorway, a smug, self-satisfied smirk tugging at her lips before she dropped back into her performative bored slump and purred a soft, whiny line directed solely at Alexander. "Babe, when are you going to finish all those boring papers? This office is so quiet and dull without anything fun to do." Alexander's entire face softened the instant her voice hit his ears, all traces of the sharp, irritable energy he'd used talking to me vanishing in a heartbeat. He pushed his office chair back from the desk without glancing at the urgent client contracts waiting for a signature, already rising to his feet to cater to her boredom before he even acknowledged my presence in the room. "Give me 5 more minutes to skim the quarterly projections, then I'll take you out for late-night loaded fries and milkshakes before I drop you off at your apartment complex," he promised her, his tone warm and tender, the exact gentle cadence he hadn't used with me in over a year. Minor plot reversal seed. I caught a glimpse of a hotel receipt sticking out of Amanda's crossbody, purse tossed on the sofa armrest as Alexander turned toward her. Dated 3 weeks prior, a luxury resort 2 hours outside Manhattan. The same weekend, he told me he was locked in a mandatory all-weekend corporate strategy retreat with his board of directors. That single crumpled slip of paper added an entirely new layer of undisclosed secret trips I hadn't yet added to my read files evidence folder. I didn't wait for Alexander to finish catering to his assistant's whims to speak up. I marched straight across his office carpet, holding my phone screen inches from his face, so he couldn't avoid seeing every intimate park shot Amanda had sent to harass me earlier that afternoon. My voice stayed steady, no screaming, no hysterics, just cold, unshakable disappointment rooted in 7 years of misplaced loyalty. What exactly is this supposed to be, Alexander? If you're dead set on ending our engagement and running off with Amanda, grow enough courage to say it straight to my face instead of sending her to flood my inbox with couple photos to torture me. Alexander's relaxed, warm expression dropped instantly, hard irritation settling across his jaw as he glanced down at the gallery on my screen. He shot a sharp, warning glare toward Amanda, who ducked her head down to stare at her popcorn bag like a child caught stealing candy, her earlier cockiness vanishing into obvious guilt the second she realized I'd brought physical proof of her taunts to confront him with. After a long, heavy silence filled only by the hum of the office air conditioner, Alexander sighed deeply and manufactured a weak excuse to shield her from accountability yet again. "I told her to keep those photos private and never send them to you. She's terrible at hiding her emotions and doesn't know how to filter what she sends people. She couldn't hold back from sharing them because she's too honest for her own good." My fingers tightened around my phone's edge, my temper fraying thin at yet another one-sided defense of her harmful behavior at my expense. "Let me get this straight," I replied flatly. "I'm supposed to thank your 26-year-old assistant for sending me dozens of intimate photos of the two of you spending the whole day together because she's just too honest to hide how close she is to my fiancé? Should I send her a handwritten thank you note for looking after you? While I'm stuck dealing with the wedding cancellation paperwork." Alexander threw his hands up in exasperation, a tired, defeated exhale rumbling in his chest like I was the unreasonable party disrupting his peaceful evening with his assistant. "I'm not asking you to praise her. Just try to see things from her perspective. She's fresh out of college with zero professional social awareness, and you're terrifying her every time you confront her over tiny, harmless moments. Can you do me one small favor and go over there to apologize for scaring her this morning?" The request landed like a heavy brick against my chest, every cell in my body screaming at how warped his sense of right and wrong had become over the past several months. I stood frozen in place, staring at him for a full 30 seconds without blinking, cataloging every subtle shift in his features that exposed how thoroughly he'd changed from the loyal, considerate man I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. Once upon a time, he prioritized my comfort above every other person in his orbit. Now Amanda's fleeting sadness carried infinitely more weight than my lifelong heartbreak over our shattered engagement. I stood motionless, eyes locked on Alexander, letting his absurd demand sink fully into my bones. Asked me to apologize to Amanda? The girl who'd worn my custom bridal gown behind my back, printed their stolen portrait to flaunt, spent an entire amusement park clinging to his side, then bombarded my messages with intimate shots, just to Tommy? Once, this man would have stepped between me and any person who dare hurt my feelings before I even voiced discomfort. Now he expected me to grovel for making his precious assistant feel nervous. A cold, hollow ache spread through my chest. I replayed every memory of the old Alexander. When my construction project got sabotaged by rival developers, he dropped his entire startup schedule to sit with me for 12 straight hours drafting legal countermeasures. When my mom underwent emergency heart surgery, he slept on the hospital waiting room floor for 3 nights straight. No complaints, no excuses. Back then, my pain was his top priority. Now Amanda's trivial hurt feelings outranked 7 years of shared history. A quiet realization hit me hard. The first critical small reversal of my long-held belief. Alexander wasn't being manipulated by Amanda. He actively enjoyed being put on a pedestal by her. My independent, high-powered career intimidated him, while her fragile, reliant demeanor fed his ego in a way I never could. I took a slow step backward, putting distance between us, so his clouded, biased gaze couldn't break my composure. My throat burned, hot tears welling up, but I refused to let them spill in front of them both. They'd treat my vulnerability as a victory to mock later. I watched Alexander's expression shift the second he spotted the gloss of moisture in my eyes. Soft pity for Amanda vanished, replaced by sharp, petty irritation directed solely at me. "Quit moping like a child," he huffed, grabbing his car keys off the desk and stepping forward to brush a thumb over my cheek in a patronizing, dismissive gesture. "I don't care if you refuse to say sorry to her. Just stop crying over something this insignificant. We can hash this out later once things calm down." I jerked my face away before his skin could touch mine. Every gentle gesture he'd ever given me now felt tainted, fake, a performance he only pulled out when he wanted me to drop my anger and let him carry on enabling Amanda's overstepping. His jaw hardened instantly at my rejection, shoulders tensing like I'd struck him instead of merely pulling away from unwanted contact. "Now you're being ridiculous," he snapped. "I reach out to comfort you, and you recoil? This is exactly why every small disagreement spirals out of control between us lately." The absurdity of his statement made my head spin. All conflict stemmed from his consistent choice to prioritize his assistant's comfort over my boundaries, yet he twisted the narrative to frame me as the unreasonable, volatile party. I glanced over at Amanda, still curled up on his leather sofa, half-empty bag of cheese popcorn balanced on her thighs, scrolling her phone without a single shred of remorse for provoking me all day long. She'd watched our entire argument unfold without a single word of remorse, secure in the knowledge Alexander would always shield her from consequences. I straightened my spine, steadying my voice enough to lay out the clear ultimatum I'd been weighing all day, a final chance for him to pick our engagement over his codependent dynamic with his secretary. "Alexander, I'm not here to bicker over popcorn or park photos. I'm here for a definitive choice. Either you cut all this inappropriate, one-sided closeness with Amanda, fire her if you have to, and fix the damage you've done to us, or we walk away from this engagement for good. No middle ground, no more endless chances for you to play hero to her while I get pushed to the sidelines." Silence crashed over the office for 10 full heartbeats. The hum of overhead air conditioning was the only sound filling the space. Amanda shot upright off the sofa the second my ultimatum landed, scrambling across the carpet to latch onto my forearm, her fingers tight enough to leave faint indentations on my skin. Her eyes stayed glued to Alexander the entire time she spoke, performing every ounce of manufactured distress solely for his benefit, barely glancing in my direction. "Miss Carter, all of this is my fault. Don't take it out on Mr. Reed," she whimpered, voice quivering with forced tears. "I never meant to come between you two. I was just lonely and grateful for how kind he's been to me. Don't force him to pick sides. He's worked nonstop since dawn without eating a single bite. Have some sympathy for him. Stop throwing fits that wear him thin." I glanced past her trembling frame straight at Alexander, watching his features soften the instant her performative worry hit his ears. All the anger he directed toward me dissolved into tender concern for her, just as it had every single time she put on a sad show to gain his protection. "He's starving." I let out a sharp, bitter laugh, nodding at the half-gallon popcorn bag she'd been hoarding on the sofa for hours. She spent the whole night sprawled on his couch shoveling processed cheese snacks while he's buried under contracts, but I'm supposed to feel bad for his empty stomach? If she cared half as much about his well-being as she pretends, she'd share even a handful of that popcorn instead of hogging it all for herself. Amanda's lower lip trembled harder, and she turned to bury her face against Alexander's arm, clinging to his suit sleeve like she might collapse without his support. Alexander immediately stepped between us, physically blocking me from her line of sight, shielding her body with his torso as if I posed an active threat to her safety. "Enough, Emily," he warned, tone sharp and unyielding. "She's only trying to keep the peace, and you're mocking her for caring about me. If you're set on being cruel, you can wait outside while I take her out for dinner, like I promised earlier." Hidden plot reversal seed. I caught a glimpse of a diamond stud bracelet on Amanda's wrist, a limited designer piece I'd ordered as my own 3-year anniversary gift from Alexander last year. He told me the shipment had gotten lost in transit. He'd never lost it. He'd regifted it to her months prior, without a single word to me. Amanda peeked out from behind his shoulder, putting on a bashful, hesitant act, one hand lightly tugging at his blazer fabric. "I shouldn't tag along if Miss Carter's upset with me, Mr. Reed. I'll head home alone so you two can talk things through without me causing more trouble." Her words were empty performative humility. She knew full well he'd never let her leave alone after a single display of sadness, and sure enough, Alexander's grip tightened around her wrist instantly, tugging her forward to stand flush against his side. He paid zero mind to my presence, zero mind to the ultimatum I'd just laid out after months of repeated boundary violations. "Nonsense. You can't walk the city subway this late at night alone," he chided her gently, voice dripping with soft care I hadn't received in years. "I won't let you skip a meal just to avoid awkward tension. We'll grab loaded milkshakes and loaded fries first, then I'll drive you straight back to your apartment complex. You wait right here for me a few minutes. I'll be right back once I wrap up this conversation with Emily." He brushed past my shoulder without so much as a glance backward, already guiding Amanda toward the office exit, their fingers laced loosely together in plain sight right in front of me. The gesture was casual, domestic, the kind of quiet physical intimacy reserved for committed partners, not CEO and entry-level staff. He didn't pause to reconsider the ultimatum I'd given him, didn't offer a single compromise, didn't even acknowledge my heartbreak beyond dismissing it as unnecessary drama. "Stay here for a bit," he tossed over his shoulder without turning to face me. "I'll circle back and sort all this out once I've gotten Amanda fed." I watched them walk out of his private office side by side, Amanda's head tilted up toward his shoulder as they chatted softly, completely oblivious to how thoroughly they'd crushed every last ounce of hope I'd clung onto for our relationship. I didn't call out after them, didn't beg him to stay, didn't chase him down the hallway to plead for a second chance. All fight had drained out of me the second he chose her late-night snack run over fixing our 7-year partnership. I grabbed my purse off the edge of his desk and walked out the opposite door, taking the service elevator down to the underground garage without a single backward glance at his glass-walled corner office. Every small hope I'd nurtured that he'd finally see Amanda's manipulative games and choose me dissolved on that elevator ride down. There was no coming back from this. By the time I pulled my luxury SUV onto the highway heading home, I'd fully accepted the truth. Alexander would never pick me over Amanda's constant, needy admiration. His ego craved her unwavering, fragile dependence far more than the equal, respectful partnership we'd built together for 7 years. Any attempt to salvage our wedding was a waste of my time, energy, and emotional bandwidth. I'd dial my parents' cell line on the drive home, ready to break the news of the full, permanent wedding cancellation. I planned to soften the blow gently, but my mother picked up on the flat, exhausted tone in my voice within 2 seconds and immediately knew something catastrophic had broken between Alexander and me. I barely finished explaining the day's sequence of events, the amusement park photos, Amanda's taunting messages, Alexander's ultimatum rejection, and his choice to prioritize her dinner over talking to me, before my father cut in, already firing off calls to the legal team managing our joint family business alliance with the Reed Tech Corporation. Our engagement wasn't merely a personal romance, it was a binding cross-family business merger, billions in shared development projects locked into a formal agreement tied to our upcoming wedding date. My parents had poured years of planning and capital into the partnership between Carter Development and Reed Tech, yet they never hesitated to side with me the second they saw how Alexander had repeatedly disrespected my boundaries. Within an hour of my phone call home, my mother dialed Alexander's parents directly, laying out every documented incident of his inappropriate closeness with Amanda, no sugarcoating, no excuses made for their son's selfish behavior. Alexander received a furious, lengthy phone lecture mid-dinner with Amanda, his parents furious he'd risked decades of inter-family business ties for a 26-year-old assistant's fleeting attention. 30 minutes after his parental scolding, my cell phone erupted with an incoming call from Alexander's personal number. I hit accept without hesitation, ready to hear whatever defensive, blame-shifting argument he planned to hurl my way. His voice seethed with unbridled anger the second the line connected, zero remorse for his own choices, only outrage that I'd involved our families in the mess he'd created himself. Are you serious right now, Emily? Running straight to my parents to tattle like a moody teenager throwing a tantrum? I took Amanda out for one simple dinner, and you dragged both our entire families into our petty lover's quarrel? Don't keep threatening to cancel the wedding. One day you'll push me too far, and I'll walk away for good without a second thought. I didn't waste a single breath arguing back. I held the phone to my ear until he finished his screaming rant, then pressed the red end call button mid-sentence, cutting him off cold without a single reply. Half an hour later, the official press release went live on Carter Development's corporate homepage. Bold, unmissable banner headline announcing the full, mutual termination of the planned Carter-Reed wedding and dissolution of all premarital joint asset accounts. No vague language, no soft spin, just a clear, public statement confirming the engagement was permanently over, all business negotiations linked to the wedding put on indefinite hold. The rain hadn't let up once through the whole night. When my parents pulled back the villa's floor-to-ceiling curtains at dawn, Alexander was still planted on our iron front gate stone step, soaked head to toe in his designer suit, shoes caked in mud, shoulders hunched against the downpour. My father refused to let him ring the intercom a single time. We piled into our town car an hour early to beat him to the Reed family ancestral estate, where all 4 parents would gather to untangle the billions in tied business contracts and the shattered engagement once and for all. I thought I'd brace myself for any sight that morning, but nothing prepared me to spot Amanda lingering at the Reed Mansion's iron gates the second our car rounded the oak driveway. She'd shed her usual loud sundresses from muted cream midi dress, zero heavy lipstick, soft neutral eyeshadow. She'd studied Mrs. Reed's taste, memorized every detail of the matriarch's social media feed to craft a humble, harmless disguise, all to sneak into the mediation and spin her version of events before anyone could speak up against her. Alexander spotted her from our vehicle's passenger window, and his face lit up with stupid, unthinking fondness before he even glanced at me sitting beside my parents. That split second of blind loyalty was the final nail in the coffin of whatever tiny leftover softness I'd held for him. Midway through the drive, I unlocked the encrypted Reed Files folder on my tablet, scrolling through the hotel receipt, re-gifted anniversary bracelet photos, amusement park evidence, and bridal gown outtakes. Every piece of proof lined up to confirm a brutal truth I'd avoided admitting for months. Alexander hadn't just been careless with boundaries. He'd actively created a secret emotional second life with Amanda, all while stringing me along for our family's corporate alliance. We filed into the estate's formal oak dining room, heavy mahogany chairs lined up for 8 people total. I pulled out my seat silently, settling between my mother and father, while the Reeds took the opposite side of the table. 10 minutes passed before the front doors creaked open. Alexander dragged a dripping umbrella inside, Amanda glued to his hip, her small hand looped through his arm like they were a paired couple arriving for Sunday brunch, not a secretary crashing a cross-family crisis summit meant to resolve his broken engagement to me. Mrs. Reed's lips pressed thin the second she laid eyes on Amanda. She'd spent years vetting me, praising my self-made business, respecting our equal partnership dynamic. She'd always hated overly dependent, calculating young women clinging to her son's wealth and status. But Alexander paid his mother's quiet disapproval no mind, pulling out a chair directly beside himself for Amanda before anyone else could speak. Mom, Dad, Mr. and Mrs. Carter, let Amanda stay to clear up all misunderstandings. Everything that's happened started from a simple miscommunication between her and Emily, he announced, tone defensive before any argument even began. Amanda immediately put on her award-winning teary performance, stepping forward with trembling hands, never once glancing toward my parents or acknowledging their presence. She directed every sad glance and shaky sentence solely at Alexander's mother and father, weaponizing manufactured vulnerability to win their sympathy. She recounted the bridal gown photo, the amusement park trip, our office confrontation, twisting every single detail to paint herself as a lonely, exploited young employee victimized by my irrational jealousy. She claimed she'd never harbored any romantic feelings for Alexander, that all physical closeness was purely innocent workplace kindness, and that I'd unfairly labeled her a homewrecker for trivial, harmless interactions. As she rambled, Alexander reached for a linen napkin, gently dabbing the fake tears off her cheeks, his touch tender and unguarded right in front of our entire families. My father slammed his palm flat against the tabletop, the sharp crack cutting her whiny monologue short. Enough of this one-sided storytelling. We have digital proof of every inappropriate exchange, every private resort trip he took behind Emily's back, every re-gifted anniversary piece handed to this girl, he said, sliding printed copies of my Reed files across the table toward the Reed elders. Mrs. Reed's hands shook as she scanned the photos and receipts, her gaze hardening on her son with every new piece of evidence she processed. Mr. Reed turned to Alexander, voice low and thunderous, no trace of the lenient father he'd always been. Fire her today, cut all personal contact permanently, or you step down from every executive board seat at Reed Tech. The Carter Development merger dies the second you choose this girl over our decades of family business trust. I watched Alexander's face cycle through panic, guilt, then stubborn, reckless defiance. Without a single beat of hesitation, he planted his feet firmly and wrapped an arm protectively around Amanda's shoulders, shielding her fully from my family's line of sight. I won't fire her. She's done nothing wrong, and I refuse to punish an innocent employee just to smooth over Emily's unreasonable tantrums, he snapped, glaring straight at me like I'd orchestrated every piece of evidence to ruin his life on purpose. This whole charade with the wedding cancellation, dragging our parents into our personal fights, this was all a premeditated plot to force me to cut Amanda out of my company. You never cared about me, only the profit our combined businesses would make. Something in me snapped loose at that accusation, every ounce of suppressed 7-year hurt rising to the surface at once. I stood slow, stepping forward until I stood directly in front of his hunched, defensive frame. No screaming, no hysterics, cold, unshakable resolve in every word I spoke. I drove my boot firm into the soft cartilage of his kneecap, sending him crumpling forward in blinding pain, then curled a fist into the back of his soaked hair, yanking his head upward, so our eyes locked dead level. Listen to me carefully and memorize every word, I said, quiet enough only he could hear, sharp enough to cut through his delusions. This wedding is dead, permanently. You can spend every night wrapped up with Amanda for the rest of your life, and I will never interfere again. But if you dare raise your voice at me, or send anyone from your company to harass my team or my family ever again, I will press full harassment charges and drag every single one of Amanda's manipulative stunts into public corporate court for the whole city to witness. He gaped up at me, stunned silent, never having seen me shed my calm corporate mask like this in 7 years of partnership. Amanda dropped to her knees beside him the second I stepped back, stroking his messy damp hair and throwing bitter, accusatory remarks my way, complaining about my unladylike violence. Alexander shook her helping hand off roughly, a flicker of exhausted clarity briefly crossing his face. For a split second, he remembered how I'd always refused to tolerate disrespect and admitted aloud he'd forgotten that core part of my identity entirely. My parents led me out of the mansion without another word exchanged with the Reeds. The engagement and cross-family business alliance officially terminated that morning. I erased every trace of Alexander from my phone, social media, home storage that night. All expensive jewelry he'd gifted went straight to women's domestic violence shelters, sentimental clothing, and small trinkets dumped in a donation bin outside our neighborhood community center. 7 years of shared memories erased in a single evening, clean and weightless, no lingering regret clinging to my chest. 1 year time jump, first major permanent shift.